Hollywood madam is ambushed.
It looked like a contract killing.
A Beverly Hills playboy is the prime suspect.
Very vain, pretty boy, probably got everything he wanted.
Then everything changes when investigators discover a high-profile movie producer is also murdered. Can the experts at SID solve this mysterious case of dark Hollywood secrets? A typical night in Hollywood. Both the in crowd and the offbeat get ready for LA's neon-lit party scene. With two victims gunned down on a popular residential street, the city's expert forensic team, the Scientific Investigation Division, has a mystery on their hands.
The victim who was shot in the head died at the scene. The other victim survived. He was shot one time in the abdomen.
People on the street recognize the victim as June Mincher, a flamboyant figure, notorious in the neighborhood.
Even though she was a female, a lot of people believed that she was a transvestite.
While investigators piece together the victim's profile, SID catalogs the odd available evidence. They find an outlandish woman's wig near the body and 6 shell casings, possibly from the killer's gun.
When we examine fired cartridge cases, what we're looking for is the individual tool marks. It's very comparable to a fingerprint. No two fired cartridge cases from 2 different firearms will be exactly the same.
While SID can't find any footprints or tire markings, detectives put together a preliminary profile of their shooter from stunned eyewitnesses.
The general description of the shooter was a male white, olive complected, dark hair, medium size, maybe 5'11", 170 pounds, in his 30s.
One person caught a fleeting glimpse of the getaway car.
Possibly an 83, 84 Mustang convertible, dark top with a dark body.
After SID returns to the lab to analyze their evidence, detectives rush to the hospital to speak to the ambush's sole survivor, Christian Pierce, a close friend of the murdered woman.
They had become very close friends, and he thought she was a wonderful person.
Pierce is now in stable condition. When he tries to remember the killer's face, all he can see is the weapon that shot him.
It was a long-barreled dark steel handgun.
Detectives dig deep to understand who the victim June Mincher really was. They uncover a woman who boldly embodied LA's most scandalous and sex-crazy obsessions.
She was a very flamboyant person who was a soft porn movie star.
June cruised about town in her Rolls Royce, and she would stuff her wig with wads of cash. To anyone who saw her, June Mincher cut a figure hard to forget.
She had a 66-inch chest that she was very well known for. She was known to have been a madam at a local cat house in the Hollywood area.
She had a lengthy prostitution record. She was known to place ads in magazines for phone sex.
When people are involved in the illicit sex trades, they do live a very dangerous lifestyle.
It's going to increase chances of something happening to you.
In this case, investigators suspect that Mincher had somehow provoked someone powerful enough to hire a hitman to do the dirty work.
It looked like a contract killing because of the shots to the head.
Detectives will need more evidence to flesh out this hunch, and even more details to find their suspect. The next day, the coroner performs an autopsy on June Mincher, recovering 7 slugs. Oddly, one more than the 6 shells found on the street. SID firearms experts now search for new leads.
What we're looking for is the individual tool marks left on that cartridge case. The bullets were consistent with .22 caliber ammunition.
Learning the gun's caliber adds fuel to the detective's theory of a hired hit.
A lot of contract killers use .22s because a .22 is very easy to aim and shoot. When a .22 hits a victim, it shatters, particularly headshots. Instead of having one bullet in the victim, you've got several lead pieces going in different directions. It's such a killing weapon, you're probably going to die from a .22 quicker than you are anything else.
But if someone ordered a hit, who had Mincher crossed that could be that vicious and cold-blooded? Investigators get their answer, as if from beyond the grave. Mincher herself had filed a police report describing in detail another brutal surprise attack.
The victim was attacked in her home and beaten very badly by 3 bodybuilder-type men approximately 1 month before she was murdered.
Mincher pointed a finger at Greg Antonelli, a 21-year-old bodybuilder from an upscale Beverly Hills family.
Very vain, pretty boy, really into bodybuilding, driving the sharp car, probably got everything he wanted.
Detectives have some questions for the young hotshot, but the investigation really heats up when another murder reveals a shocking link between Hollywood's glamorous movie business and its seedy sex industry. Just weeks before her murder, June Mincher had been brutally attacked. In her police report, she accused Greg Antonelli, a narcissistic bodybuilder for whom a slow-simmering phone flirtation had boiled over into an explosive obsession.
June Mincher and Greg Antonelli met when Greg answered an ad in a sex magazine. They had phone conversations for months, to the point where he wanted to meet her.
In the ads, Mincher described herself as a sexy African goddess, a term that failed to account for her recent weight gain.
She was reluctant to meet him because she did not look good and kept refusing his offers.
Desperate to meet his fantasy woman, Antonelli tracks her down.
At some point, he found out where she lived and confronted her for the first time.
But what he finds throws him into a rage, which in turn pushes Mincher to defend herself.
It became clear that she was very angry, very antagonistic, and wanted to get revenge.
And the feud escalated, especially when June was assaulted and filed a police report.
She declared war on the Antonellis. She was attacking not just the Antonelli property, but also the family businesses. She was harassing everybody.
A month later, Mincher was shot to death. For investigators, all the evidence points to Greg Antonelli.
The apparent motive seemed to center on the deteriorated relationship between Greg Antonelli and June Mincher.
5 days into the investigation, detectives are eager to speak with Antonelli. The Beverly Hills playboy recounts how Mincher's campaign for revenge so frightened him that he was forced to hire a private investigator, Michael Pascal, for protection. Antonelli insists that neither he nor any of his hired muscle had anything to do with the murder. But eyewitness accounts from the night of June's murder contradict Antonelli's claims. They are nearly sure that it was Antonelli in the dark Mustang fleeing the crime scene.
It was one of the stronger pieces of evidence.
While the facts no longer fit investigators' theory of a contract hit, a strong motive and eyewitness testimony make Antonelli the prime suspect. The next day, Antonelli is arrested for the murder of June Mincher.
I believed that we arrested the right person.
But when Antonelli is brought to trial, prosecutors lose the upper hand.
One of the key witnesses who identified Greg as being the shooter completely backed off that identification.
And Christian Pierce, still traumatized after being shot alongside Mincher, couldn't recall the shooter's face. With no more witnesses and no real physical evidence, Greg Antonelli is acquitted in the murder of June Mincher. Investigators are back to square one.
It was very frustrating when they were unable to find the people actually responsible for the murder.
So basically the case was done.
For the next 4 years, June Mincher's murder investigation languishes in a cold case file. Until, out of the blue, a barroom boast mysteriously connects it to one of Hollywood's most notorious crimes. For 4 years, June Mincher's murder investigation has gone nowhere. Then the LA County Sheriff's Department gets a break in another cold case. Investigators discover an unexpected connection between Mincher's death and a murder that had been front-page news a year before her shooting.
The sheriffs were investigating a homicide of Roy Radin, a movie producer out of New York, who was attempting to produce the movie Cotton Club.
He had been shot 11 times in the back of the head, and it appeared to be a contract killing.
But in the high-roller world of Hollywood movies, where millions are at stake, witnesses are hard to find.
People were afraid to come forward and talk, so the case did go cold after a period of time.
The Radin homicide made headlines, but the investigation went nowhere. And the murders of a big-time Hollywood producer and a small-time sex star had nothing in common but the look of a contract killing. Until Bill Ryder, an ex-cop turned bodyguard, contacts police, and these two different LA worlds collide. At the time of the murders, Ryder's job was to protect many of Hollywood's most powerful executives.
Ryder used a lot of friends of his who were involved with bodybuilding at Gold's Gym.
One of his acquaintances, William Menser, was notorious for crossing the line from security guard to terrorizing thug.
He was involved in physically intimidating people for debt collections.
He was able to act like everybody's best friend, but he could also turn on a dime.
The brash Menser brags to the ex-cop Ryder how he had gotten away with murder for killing film producer Roy Radin. And then he recounts another killing, one police don't at first recognize.
It was the story of how they had killed a person that they referred to as the Thing, the black transvestite.
Yeah, the thing.
But Menser's slur starts to ring bells for detectives. Mincher had often been mistaken for a transvestite. Suddenly, investigators suspect that they have the key that will reopen two cold cases.
That evidence led us to believe that there was only one individual that was responsible for killing June Mincher and Roy Radin, and that was Bill Menser.
At this point, investigators have only Ryder's word that Menser had confessed to these murders.
In order to corroborate his story, we said, what can you give us to show us what you're telling us is true?
That's when Ryder drops an even bigger bombshell.
He said, well, they used my gun.
Mincer told him he needed to borrow a gun to do a job for Michael Pascal.
The name clicks for investigators. Michael Pascal ran the security team hired to intimidate June Mincher. The cast of characters now seems complete, but the mystery is far from solved. Police suspect that Pascal ordered the hit and hired Mincher to do the job.
Pascal was really the instigator here. Everything points to his involvement.
But to prove that Mincher pulled the trigger, investigators would first need to test the gun he used.
The sheriffs persuaded Mr. Ryder to surrender that weapon to us.
Ryder, not wanting to be implicated, turns over his gun, which is sent to SID. Next, investigators use Ryder in a classic sting operation to trap their prime suspect.
Our informant, Bill Ryder, agreed to wear body wires and engage the suspect in conversation about the homicides.
Ryder convinces Mincher to meet him at a local hotel. At first, the usual loudmouth Mincher guards his words, but soon enough, his arrogance gets the best of him.
Mincher started talking about how he had killed the victim. He had tracked her down and then proceeded to shoot her several times in the head.
Ryder, the ex-cop, skillfully nudges Mincher to describe his weapon.
You're all freaked out. What are you so freaked out for?
Mr. Ryder said, "I understand that you used my gun and killed the victim." And Mincher said, "Yeah, I did use your gun."
The plan works perfectly. With a confession on tape, investigators need to confirm Ryder's gun killed June Mincher.
The gun in question was a .22 caliber Sturm Ruger semi-automatic pistol.
But just as investigators reach the home stretch, their luck runs out. The shell casings that SID needs to definitively link the gun to June's murder no longer exist.
They said our casings were destroyed. They were used in a trial, and the defendant was found not guilty.
It's like a punch to the gut. It knocks you back.
As valuable as a taped confession is, without hard evidence, investigators can't bring William Mincher to justice. Then, SID discovers that the fashion accessory that June chose to create her identity may actually identify her killer. Investigators of porn actress June Mincher's murder need solid evidence to prove a violent bodyguard, William Mincher, pulled the trigger. 4 years earlier, SID analyzed every inch of the crime scene, except for the wildly flamboyant wig found by her body.
Something's here.
Much to our luck, one of the casings that had been expended from the murder weapon got lodged in the wig and had never been found. That wig saved us.
The missing seventh shell. The last step in this mystery requires ballistics to confirm that the shell from June's wig matches the gun Mincher confessed to using on the undercover tape.
You compare on a comparison microscope the test-fired cartridge cases with the evidence to see if the evidence is marked with the same pattern of tool marks, and if they were, then you have the identification.
And when the report comes back from SID, their identification is complete.
It's a match.
That one casing that had been ejected from the gun into June Mincher's wig was a match.
Now you have linkage between a known suspect firearm and a cartridge case left at the scene.
I was very happy that now we got a real key piece of evidence, hardcore evidence to use.
But a few loose ends still need to be tied up. 4 years earlier, eyewitnesses had identified Greg Antonelli as the man fleeing the crime scene. But when they see the striking resemblance between Mincher and Antonelli, they change their story. With a taped confession, ballistics reports, and now eyewitnesses, William Mincher is arrested for the murder of June Mincher, as well as Roy Radin. Mincher is convicted in the Roy Radin Cotton Club murder-for-hire case over a shady movie deal. And with a second conviction looming, he confesses to killing June Mincher.
Bill Mincher eventually pled guilty to first-degree murder and a sentence of life without parole. He didn't want to take a chance on receiving a death sentence because of his prior murder conviction now on the Radin case.
Then, investigators go after the man they believe to be the mastermind of the Mincher murder, security boss Michael Pascal. They speculate he ordered the hit on Mincher to send a brutal message that he was not someone to be crossed.
Pascal was given the opportunity to plead guilty to voluntary manslaughter, which he did. He ultimately became ill and died in custody.
Greg Antonelli was never again implicated in the June Mincher murder. In the end, SID's persistence pays off.
The Radin case was the one that got all the glitz and the glamour because there was a lot of high-level Hollywood involvement. The Mincher case was more the blue-collar case, but the end result was the same. So that's the way the justice system's supposed to work.